War and migration are not only traumatic to the individual, they also are collective traumas, in that they lead to the shared injuries to a population's social and physical ecologies. These injuries require not only individual but collective responses, such as mobilizing family and community engagement and resilience to promote and maintain psychosocial recovery and well-being. Recovery often involves the restoration of moral, social, and political agency through the creation of shared meaning and narratives. The dominant concepts of individual trauma and PTSD as a primary reaction to such changes has been recently critiqued. Research shows that the stress of migration and other such disruptions cannot be reduced to single war experiences, but rather have more to do with the disruptive impact of the daily stresses that people are dealing with, such as poverty, stigmatization, isolation, and deprivation. Further, the focus on pathological symptoms in the wake of trauma tends not to take into consideration the important strengths and sources of individual and collective resilience. The tendency to universalize Western diagnostic and healing approaches often discounts local idioms of distress and cultural coping strategies. So rather than focusing primarily on an individual approach which locates trauma within personal functioning, a systems approach sees the impact of organized violence occurring primarily within families, kinship, and communities. It locates trauma in relationships, in the destruction of human connection. The sociologist Kai Erikson made the initial distinction between individual and collective trauma. He saw individual trauma as a blow to the psyche that breaks through one's defenses so suddenly and with such brutal force that one cannot react to it effectively. And it does so in a way that often leads to people withdrawing into themselves, feeling numb, afraid, vulnerable, and very alone. Collective trauma, on the other hand, is a blow to the basic tissues of social life that damages the bonds attaching people together and impairs their prevailing sense of communality. It is a form of shock all the same, a gradual realization that the community no longer exists as an effective source of support and that an important part of the self has been lost. Collective trauma is relational. The strain on relationships resulting from traumatic events may reduce a sense of trustworthiness, safety, openness, emotional quality, and clarity. And this often leads to negative interactions in families and communities and will have an impact on intrapsychic aspects of their experience, on their thoughts, feelings, memories, and their sense of personal agency. This distress often occurs in the absence of individual trauma. So as mentioned previously, community resilience refers to the capacity of the collective to overcome shared trauma or adversity as manifest in social cohesion, mutual support, hope, and in the presence of communal narratives that give the experience meaning and purpose. In an ecosystems or community approach, rather than the client being the individual, the client is the social environment, and the focus is on strengths, resources, and continuity. One of the most important assumptions behind this approach is that communities have the capacity to heal themselves, and that the greatest resources for recovery are the community members themselves. The activities supported by such an approach are often those that the community members are already engaged in. They're not passive victims, but they're actively often trying to deal with the situation. In coming together around practical concerns, the connections between people may be enhanced, as has been long recognized in the psychosocial field, that these sites become places where people can share information, express emotion, and provide mutual support. Community members have many advantages over outside providers in effecting change after a crisis. That's why we need to engage them in the process of promoting resilience. They have greater access to local knowledge of existing resources. They know who are the most vulnerable people in their population and how to reach out to them. And they possess networks of relationships that have been developed over time. It is important that for providers working to build community resilience, that they understand the complexity of the situation and the systems in which they're working. And here the focus is less on direct services, but more on offering a structure and support that promotes positive social connection and social processes. Most often this involves helping renew old and build new connections between constituencies and helping people recognize and enhance existing resources for recovery. Community resilience is a relational process. Its success depends on competent leadership and the restoration of caring, trusting relationships. As has been described in recent studies of community resilience, its shape is culturally based, socially constructed over time, and varies according to circumstances. It requires creative improvisation.